Maya had always loved peace. For years, she had done her best to live a quiet, simple life in the small suburban town. She was known as the friendly, caring schoolteacher who greeted every child with a smile. Her days were filled with teaching, helping others, and walking her dog, Max, the one companion she trusted most in the world. Max was more than just a dog to Maya, he was her family. He had been with her through thick and thin, through the years of service in Delta Force, and the days when she had finally decided to leave that violent world behind. Before becoming a teacher, Maya had been a Delta Force commander, one of the most elite soldiers in the world. Her training had been brutal, years of learning how to fight, how to survive, how to be invisible. She had worked on dangerous missions, protecting her country, doing things most people would never understand. But when it was all over, she wanted nothing more than peace. She had decided to leave it behind, finding comfort in a small town away from the world of violence, surrounded by the calm of nature, the laughter of children, and the loyalty of Max. One evening, after a long day of teaching, Maya took Max for his usual walk. They would stroll through the quiet streets, enjoying the cool breeze and the sound of leaves rustling in the trees. Max would sniff around, wagging his tail, while Maya would take in the calmness of the night. This was her favorite time of day, the time when she felt truly at ease. But that night, everything changed. A group of local thugs, known for their trouble-making ways, were causing chaos in the neighborhood. They had been on the streets all week, picking fights, stealing, and scaring the residents. No one dared to confront them. They were too wild, too reckless. As Maya walked with Max, unaware of the gang's activities, the sound of laughter and shouting grew louder. Max, who usually remained calm, began to grow tense. His ears perked up, and he started to bark. Maya immediately stopped in her tracks, knowing something wasn't right. She could hear the group approaching, their footsteps heavy, their voices loud. "Look at that dog," one of the gang members called out, pointing at Max. They had seen Maya and her dog walking through the street before, and they didn't like that she was out here, seemingly so calm and unaffected by their behavior. They saw her as weak, easy to push around. Without warning, one of them pulled out a metal rod, swinging it toward Max. Maya's heart raced as she saw it coming. She moved quickly, trying to pull Max away from the gang, but it was too late. The rod struck Max with a loud crack, sending him tumbling to the ground. Maya froze, her breath caught in her throat. Max, the dog who had been her best friend, lay motionless on the pavement. The gang laughed, their cruel words echoing through the empty street. "That'll teach him to bark at us," one of them said, grinning. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes, but she fought to hold them back. Her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She looked down at Max, his once bright eyes now dull, his body lifeless. In that moment, the world around her seemed to fade away. The gang continued to mock her, their voices growing louder as they taunted her. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. She was no longer the quiet teacher. She was no longer the woman who had left the world of Delta Force behind. Something inside her had snapped. She had spent years pushing away the soldier she once was, but now, with Max lying lifeless at her feet, the memories of her training, of her missions, flooded back. The anger, the hurt, the rage, they all came rushing back like a wave, drowning out the noise of the gang. The woman who had once been a deadly force was no longer hidden beneath layers of normalcy. She was awake. She was ready. But Maya didn't move just yet. She stood there for a moment, staring at the gang, her hands still clenched, her body trembling. The gang's laughter continued, but they didn't see what was coming. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They didn't know that the woman standing before them was trained to handle far worse than their cruel taunts. As the gang continued to jeer, Maya made a decision. She wasn't going to let them get away with this. She wasn't going to walk away like she had in the past. Max deserved justice. She deserved justice. And in that moment, Maya knew that the peaceful life she had built was over. The soldier inside her was awake, and she would make sure the gang learned what happens when you mess with the wrong person. With a deep breath, she turned and walked away, but not in defeat. She walked with a purpose. The journey that was about to begin would lead her back into a world she thought she had left behind, a world where she would show the gang that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. As Maya disappeared into the shadows of the night, she felt something stir deep within her. The soldier was back. And this time, nothing would stand in her way. Maya walked away from the gang that night, but the pain of losing Max weighed heavily on her heart. Every step felt like a burden, but with each step, something deep inside her began to awaken. It had been years since she had been part of that world, the world of Delta Force, where every mission was a test of endurance, strength, and survival. But the gang's cruelty, the senseless violence against Max, had stirred something in her that she couldn't ignore. She felt like a switch had flipped, and the soldier she thought she had buried deep inside had returned. She didn't return home immediately. Instead, she wandered aimlessly through the streets, lost in thought. Her mind raced, replaying the moment over and over again. She had always told herself that she was done with that life, that she had made the right choice when she left the force. She had wanted peace. She had wanted a simple, quiet life where she could forget the bloodshed, the danger, the violence. But now, with Max gone, all she could feel was a burning anger. Maya found herself standing in front of a small cafe. It was a place she used to go after work to unwind, sip on a cup of coffee, and read a book. The warm lights inside beckoned her, but she didn't go in. Instead, she stared through the window, watching the people inside chatting and laughing, completely unaware of what had happened outside. A bitter smile tugged at her lips. It was a reminder of the life she had left behind, the life that now felt like a distant memory. She wanted to scream, to shout at them, to make them understand the pain she was feeling. But she knew it wouldn't help. She walked away from the cafe, her mind still clouded with rage. She had to do something, something that would make the gang pay for what they had done. She couldn't let them get away with it. Maya knew the gang wasn't just a group of troublemakers. They were part of a larger network, one that had been causing trouble in her town for months. Drugs, stolen goods, intimidation. They had their fingers in many illegal activities, and Maya realized that by taking them down, she could do more than just avenge Max. She could rid the neighborhood of a dangerous threat. But she needed a plan. She couldn't just rush in without thinking. Maya had learned the importance of strategy during her time in Delta Force. Every mission required careful planning, every move calculated, every step executed with precision. She would need to approach this the same way. The first step was to gather information. Maya wasn't going to act recklessly, no matter how badly she wanted revenge. She needed to understand the gang's operations, their members, their weaknesses. She needed to find out who was in charge, who was pulling the strings. She didn't have much time to waste. The gang would likely move on to their next act of violence soon, and Maya couldn't afford to let that happen. She began her research, reaching out to old contacts from her days in the force. It wasn't easy, most of them had moved on with their lives, just like she had, but Maya knew how to get the information she needed. She had always been good at digging, at uncovering secrets. As the days passed, Maya grew more determined. She started following the gang's movements, carefully observing their activities from a distance. She noticed their patterns, where they went, who they met with, when they would be at certain spots. It was like watching a puzzle come together. She had always been a patient person, and this part of the plan was no different. One afternoon, while observing the gang near a local warehouse, Maya overheard a conversation that confirmed her suspicions. They were planning a big shipment of stolen goods, something that would bring them a large profit. It was the perfect opportunity for her to strike. Maya's heart raced as she realized this was her chance. She could take them down right here, right now. But she didn't act impulsively. Instead, she returned home, taking the time to prepare. She gathered the weapons she had kept hidden, the ones she hadn't touched in years. She took out her old combat gear, dusting it off and making sure everything was in working order. She knew what she was about to do wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to ensure the gang wouldn't terrorize her town any longer. The night before her planned strike, Maya couldn't sleep. The memories of her time in Delta Force flooded back. She remembered the missions, the friends she had lost, the enemies she had faced. She remembered the fear, the adrenaline, and the satisfaction of completing a mission. But now, everything felt different. This wasn't a mission for the government. This wasn't a mission for anyone else but herself and the memory of Max. The next morning, Maya set her plan in motion. She dressed in her tactical gear, slipping into the shadows like she used to on so many covert missions. Her movements were silent, calculated. She made her way to the warehouse, where the gang was expected to meet. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow over the horizon. It was the perfect time to strike. Maya's pulse quickened as she approached the entrance of the warehouse. She knew this was just the beginning. There would be more work to do, more danger to face, but she was ready. The soldier inside her had returned, and she would make sure the gang learned what it meant to cross the wrong person. She wasn't the woman they thought she was. She wasn't just a schoolteacher. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she moved closer to the warehouse, Maya's eyes narrowed. She could hear the muffled voices of the gang inside. It was time to act. With a deep breath, she stepped into the shadows, prepared for whatever came next. This time, she wasn't running away. She was fighting back. Her revenge had only just begun. Maya's heart pounded as she crouched behind a stack of crates, peering into the dimly lit warehouse. The gang members were inside, talking loudly, unaware of the danger approaching them. She could hear their voices, mostly gruff men, laughing and boasting about the shipment they were about to receive. The sounds of boxes being moved around echoed through the building. Maya had spent days observing their patterns, memorizing every detail about their operations. She had learned everything she could, from their routine to their weaknesses. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping them, preventing more innocent people from getting hurt. Maya knew she could no longer let the gang continue their reign of terror. She had to act. She had carefully planned every step of this mission. The warehouse was a perfect target, isolated, with a clear exit, and filled with the gang's stolen goods. Maya could tell they were expecting an important delivery tonight, one that would give them a massive profit. She was going to take that away from them. Her eyes scanned the entrance. She knew that there were 2 guards standing at the front, watching the door. They had been the easiest to spot from her surveillance earlier that day. Maya had already mapped out their positions and counted the number of men inside. She knew she wouldn't be able to take them all on at once, but she didn't need to. She just needed to isolate them, take out the leaders, and make sure they couldn't escape. With a deep breath, Maya slipped from the shadows, her movements silent as she crept toward the side of the building. The night air was cool against her skin, but there was a fire burning inside her, driving her forward. She moved quickly and decisively, her training kicking in. She had done this countless times before, except now, it was personal. Maya reached the side entrance of the warehouse and gently pried open the door, just wide enough for her to slip through. She moved quickly, her boots barely making a sound on the concrete floor. Inside, the gang was still unaware. They were focused on unloading the goods, too busy with their plans to notice the quiet figure that had slipped past them. She paused for a moment, scanning the room. The gang leader, a burly man with a scar across his face, was barking orders to his crew. Maya's eyes narrowed. He was the one who had been at the front when they killed Max. He was the one who had started it all. He would be the first to go. Maya's hand went to her side, where her knife was sheathed. She had always preferred close combat, silent, swift, and deadly. She moved closer to the leader, her body blending with the shadows. As she approached, she noticed one of the other gang members had strayed from the group. This was her chance. In one fluid motion, Maya lunged, grabbing the gang member by the throat and pulling him into the shadows. His eyes widened in surprise, but before he could make a sound, she silenced him with a quick strike to the neck. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. The leader, still oblivious, continued barking orders to the others. Maya now had the perfect opportunity to get closer. She crouched low, moving silently behind a stack of crates. The warehouse was filled with shadows, and Maya knew how to use them to her advantage. She had always been good at remaining unseen, even in the most dangerous situations. She waited for the right moment. The gang leader turned his back, giving her the opening she needed. In one swift motion, she moved toward him, her knife flashing in the low light. She aimed for his throat, but before she could strike, another gang member stepped into her path. Maya's instincts kicked in. She ducked under the gang member's swinging punch and quickly swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. He grunted in pain, but Maya didn't waste time. She spun around and drove her knife into his chest, silencing him instantly. The leader turned just in time to see Maya standing over the fallen body of his man. His eyes widened in shock, but there was no time for hesitation. Maya lunged at him, moving with the speed and precision of a seasoned fighter. She caught him off guard, knocking him to the ground. "Who the hell are you?" the leader shouted, struggling to break free. Maya's eyes locked onto his, cold and determined. "You're about to find out." With a swift motion, she pressed the knife to his throat, forcing him to stay still. His breathing quickened as he realized the situation. He had no way out. But Maya didn't finish him off right away. Instead, she stood over him, looking down at him with disdain. "You thought you could get away with this, didn't you?" she said, her voice low and controlled. "You thought you could hurt people without facing consequences. Well, you're wrong." The leader's eyes darted around the warehouse, looking for an escape. But Maya was already thinking ahead. She knew that if she killed him now, the rest of the gang would be on alert. They'd be ready to retaliate. So, she did something even more dangerous. She took him with her. Maya grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the back of the warehouse, where the remaining gang members were still unaware of the danger. She had no intention of letting them escape. She wanted them all to see the leader, the one they all feared, brought down to his knees. As she reached the back of the warehouse, she saw the others gathered around, unloading the goods. Maya knew this was the moment. With the leader in tow, she stepped into the light. The gang members froze, their eyes widening in shock. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected her. Without a word, Maya released the leader, letting him stumble to the ground. He looked up at his men, his expression one of disbelief. But it was too late for him to regain control. Maya was already moving, taking out the closest gang member with a swift kick to the chest. The chaos that followed was quick and brutal. Maya's movements were calculated, efficient. She took down one gang member after another, each strike precise, each move designed to incapacitate without hesitation. The gang was falling apart, their grip on the situation slipping. But Maya wasn't finished. Not yet. She had come here for justice, and she was going to make sure they understood that no one, not even the most dangerous gang, could escape her wrath. By the time the last gang member had fallen, Maya stood victorious in the middle of the warehouse. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and blood, but Maya felt nothing but the satisfaction of completing what she had started. The leader, now unconscious on the ground, was the last to fall. Maya stood over him, looking down at the wreckage she had caused. She had achieved her goal. She had made them pay. But it wasn't just about the gang anymore. It was about reclaiming her power, her strength, and her peace. And for the first time since Max had been taken from her, Maya felt that something inside her had finally found peace. Maya stood amidst the aftermath, breathing heavily but feeling an undeniable sense of relief. The warehouse, once a hub of chaos and criminal activity, was now silent except for the distant sirens that had begun to echo down the streets. She had completed her mission. She had dismantled the gang. But as she looked around at the bodies sprawled on the cold concrete floor, a cold thought crossed her mind: this wasn't over. The gang might be down, but their influence reached far beyond this warehouse. She knew the leader she'd captured had ties to more dangerous people, powerful connections that went well beyond the streets of her quiet town. There would be others who would seek revenge, who would want to finish what she had started. Maya knew she had to finish this once and for all. But Maya wasn't the kind of person to run from danger. She had been trained for moments like these, when everything was on the line, when everything she had worked for could be destroyed with a single mistake. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing as she moved quickly to secure the scene. She couldn't afford to leave any loose ends. The first thing she did was make sure the gang leader was still alive. He had been knocked out cold during the scuffle, but she wasn't going to take any chances. She kneeled beside him, checking for signs of life, and was relieved to find his pulse still strong. He had to wake up. She needed him to answer the questions she had, to lead her to the bigger fish, those who were truly behind the operation. Maya had known when she decided to confront the gang that it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about stopping a tide of crime that had infected her town and had been threatening to destroy the peace she had fought so hard to build. She wasn't going to let the man who had caused so much pain escape. Not again. After tying the leader up and leaving him in a secure spot, Maya started to gather the evidence she needed. She rifled through the boxes of stolen goods, pulling out documents, weapons, and anything that could point to the gang's connections. She was meticulous, moving quickly but carefully. Every clue she found added more pieces to the puzzle, more evidence that this gang wasn't working alone. It didn't take long for Maya to realize just how deep the operation went. The gang had been smuggling drugs, trafficking stolen goods, and using the warehouse as a front for money laundering. But there were other, darker operations that Maya hadn't expected. Hidden among the crates, she found a list of names, prominent figures, local politicians, and even law enforcement officials. The deeper she dug, the more she realized just how far the corruption spread. Her heart sank as she looked over the list. These weren't just criminals she was dealing with, these were people with power, people who would stop at nothing to keep their operations hidden. They had the resources to protect themselves, to silence anyone who threatened their empire. And now, Maya was a threat. She knew she had to be careful. She had already drawn too much attention by taking down the gang, and if these figures were involved, she couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The stakes were higher now than ever before. Maya's mind went into overdrive. She needed to act fast before anyone realized what had happened at the warehouse. The gang members she had left behind would wake up soon, and they would want to know what had happened to their leader. They would be coming for her, but Maya wasn't going to wait around to be attacked. She would strike first. She checked the clock on her phone. It was late, but there was no time to rest. Maya knew she had to move before the authorities arrived and the chaos began. The first thing she needed to do was to gather any evidence that could implicate the higher UPS. She needed proof to bring these people down, and she needed to do it without anyone knowing she was the one behind it all. With the stolen goods packed and the leader bound, Maya made her way to the back of the warehouse, where a van was parked, ready for transport. She loaded everything inside, making sure to keep her movements quick and efficient. She didn't want anyone to know she was here, especially the police. They were bound to show up sooner or later, and she couldn't afford to leave any trace of herself behind. Once the van was packed, Maya drove through the streets of the town, her mind focused on the next steps. She needed a safe place to lay low, somewhere she could plan her next move. As much as she wanted to confront the corrupt figures behind the gang, she knew she had to be patient. She couldn't afford to take unnecessary risks. Maya had made a decision: she would take down the entire criminal operation, but she would do it on her own terms. She didn't need help from anyone. She had already shown herself to be capable of handling things alone. The world she had left behind, the world of covert operations, secret missions, and high-risk targets, was now her reality once again. She couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions as she drove. Part of her missed the life she had once led. The rush of adrenaline, the satisfaction of completing a mission, it was all so familiar. But there was another part of her, the part that had longed for peace, for something simpler, that felt a deep sense of loss. Maya knew she had no choice but to finish what she had started. She had already lost Max, and now she couldn't turn back. The world had taken something precious from her, and it was time to take it back. She arrived at her destination, a small, secluded cabin in the woods where she could hide out until she figured out what to do next. The cabin was hidden from the main road, and Maya knew it would be the perfect place to lay low and plan her next move. Inside the cabin, Maya unloaded the van and spread the evidence across the table. She was still working through everything, piecing together the final details. But one thing was clear: she was going to take down the entire operation, piece by piece, no matter what it took. As she sat at the table, reviewing the documents, Maya realized something: this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking control of her own life, about making sure that the people responsible for her pain would pay. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. The hunt had only just begun. Maya sat at the small wooden table inside the cabin, the documents spread out in front of her like pieces of a puzzle. Her mind raced as she looked at the names, the connections, and the plans. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of the corrupt system she was up against. She knew that the gang was only the beginning. The people behind them, those powerful figures, were the true threat, and they had no idea what was coming. She had spent the last few days carefully piecing together her plan. Every step was calculated, every move designed to take down the operation at its core. The evidence she had gathered was more than enough to expose the criminals, but Maya knew she couldn't just hand it over to the authorities. The people in power were too deeply embedded in the system. They could easily cover their tracks, silence anyone who got in their way. Maya had to make sure that when she struck, she did so in a way that no one could ignore, no one could stop. The hours passed as she sat in the dim light, formulating her next steps. She couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The gang members, the ones she had left behind at the warehouse, were bound to report back to their superiors soon. And when they did, the whole operation would be on high alert. Maya needed to move quickly. She glanced out the window of the cabin, watching the sun set behind the trees. The quiet, peaceful surroundings seemed a world away from the chaos that had overtaken her life. But Maya knew that this was only temporary. She couldn't stay hidden forever. The moment had come for her to finish what she had started. Maya had learned that the gang's leader, the one she had captured and left bound at the warehouse, wasn't just a low-level criminal. He had connections to a far larger network, one that extended into the very heart of the town's political system. And now, she had the leverage she needed to bring it all down. She knew that the final confrontation wouldn't be easy. The people she was up against had resources, protection, and power on their side. But Maya wasn't afraid. She had spent her entire life fighting in the shadows, and now, she was ready to step into the light. The next morning, Maya loaded up her gear and prepared for the final showdown. She had a target in mind, A high-profile gala, an event that was being held by the very people she was after. It was the perfect opportunity. The town's elite would be gathered in one place, their attention on their wealth and status, oblivious to the threat closing in on them. Maya knew this would be her only chance to strike. She couldn't risk the criminals getting away again. She had already lost too much, and now, she was prepared to give everything she had to bring them down. She arrived at the gala, her face hidden behind a mask. The venue was grand, filled with people dressed in elegant gowns and tuxedos, laughing and talking as if the world outside didn't matter. Maya moved through the crowd, her presence barely noticeable. She blended in, just another face in the sea of guests. But unlike the others, she wasn't here to socialize. She was here to bring justice. As she walked through the halls, Maya's eyes scanned the room. She could feel the tension building inside her, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was it, the final act. The criminals she had been tracking were here, within reach. Maya's target was the man at the top, the one pulling the strings behind the gang. He was standing near the back of the room, surrounded by his associates. He had a smug look on his face, as if he owned the world. But Maya knew better. This man, this arrogant figure, was about to lose everything. Maya slipped past the crowd, moving with purpose, her every step calculated. She didn't need to draw attention to herself. She knew that once she made her move, everything would change. The man in front of her was the key to everything, the one who could bring down the entire operation. She reached him without anyone noticing, her hand poised at her side, where her knife was concealed. Maya was so close now that she could hear his voice, low and steady as he talked to his associates. She waited for the right moment. The moment when he was most vulnerable. And then, it came. With a quick motion, Maya grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him away from the group. His eyes widened in shock, but before he could react, she pressed the knife to his throat. The crowd around them froze, their laughter turning to silence as they realized something was wrong. Maya's voice was calm, cold. "You're finished," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "It's over. Your empire is crumbling." The man tried to struggle, but he was no match for Maya's strength. She held him steady, her grip unyielding. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable, but it didn't matter. He was going to pay for everything he had done. "Do you know who I am?" the man asked, his voice shaking. "You think you can just take me down? I have power. I have connections. You'll never get away with this." Maya's expression didn't change. She had heard this kind of talk before, from criminals who thought they were untouchable. But she knew better. She had faced tougher challenges, had fought against enemies far more dangerous than him. "Your power means nothing now," Maya replied. "You're just another criminal who made the mistake of underestimating the wrong person." The man's face twisted in anger as he tried to push Maya away, but it was useless. She was too quick, too skilled. With a swift motion, she disarmed him, knocking him to the ground. The crowd gasped in surprise, but no one moved. They were all watching, paralyzed by fear. Maya didn't waste any time. She pulled out the evidence she had gathered, documents, photos, and recordings that exposed the criminal network he had been running. She threw them onto the floor in front of him, letting everyone see the truth. "This is how your story ends," Maya said, her voice steady as she looked down at him. "You've been living in the shadows for too long. Now the world will know who you really are." As the authorities arrived, Maya slipped into the crowd, disappearing before anyone could stop her. She had done what she came to do. She had taken down the criminals, and she had brought justice to those who needed it most. But for Maya, the battle wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming control, about making sure that the people who had caused her so much pain would never hurt anyone again. She had fought in the shadows for too long, but now, she had emerged victorious. As Maya walked away from the gala, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The soldier who had been buried inside her for so long had finally found closure. And though the world would never know the full extent of her actions, Maya knew one thing for sure: she had made a difference. The fight was over, but Maya's journey was far from done. The world may have taken Max, but she would always fight for justice. No one could ever take that away from her.